There's a crisis unfolding on America's highways right now, and it's one of those things that affects pretty much everything. The price of what you buy, the security of our entire supply chain, and, maybe most importantly, the safety of every single person out on the road.
Okay, so let's just dive right into this. What exactly is happening? Because this isn't just one single problem we're talking about. It's more like a cascade of failures, a domino effect, that has frankly fundamentally broken a vital American industry. Let's start with the most sobering number. Since 2014, the number of fatal crashes involving large trucks has skyrocketed by nearly 40%. Now think about that. We've spent billions on new safety technology, yet our roads are getting more dangerous. This isn't just a minor uptick, it's a massive public safety failure. But safety is just one part of this perfect storm. We're also seeing what amounts to a national security crisis with cargo theft on an industrial scale. And at the exact same time, the drivers and the companies who are actually trying to follow the rules, they're facing economic ruin. It's become a system where, unbelievably, the worst actors are the ones who are winning. So, you have to ask, how in the world did we get here? This is the crucial question, right? Because a crisis this big doesn't just appear overnight. It was the result of a whole series of seemingly small, totally disconnected decisions that ended up creating this powerful domino effect.
Well, it all started with this one core belief, an idea that has driven the trucking industry for years, the idea that the United States was facing a permanent, critical shortage of truck drivers. This one assumption became the justification for everything that came next.
So to solve this shortage, really influential groups like the American Trucking Associations, they lobbied to make it easier, way easier for people to become truck drivers. The goal was simple, just lower every single barrier to entry. The thinking was that all this new talent would naturally flow to the big, established, rule-following companies.
But here's the kicker. That assumption, it was based on a totally outdated model of the trucking industry. It was a massive miscalculation based on a world that, thanks to new technology and deregulation, just doesn't exist anymore. And that one mistake would have absolutely catastrophic consequences.
So how did that one little mistake lead to a total breakdown? Well, it happened like a chain reaction. A series of regulatory changes and tech shifts came along and just completely dismantled the old system piece by piece, guardrail by guardrail. Okay, before we get into the timeline of how this all fell apart, we need to understand one key term, the Non-Domiciled Commercial Driver's License, or CDL. This license, which was designed for foreign nationals, it became a massive loophole in the system. It basically opened the floodgates for a huge influx of drivers with very little oversight.
Now, what's really wild is when you look at how each step just systematically weakened the industry's safeguards. In 2016, they stopped enforcing English proficiency rules. Then in 2018, the electronic logging mandate, which was supposed to track hours safely, came with built-in backdoors, making it easy to fake your hours. Then, of course, the non-domiciled CDL in 2019, and finally, in 2022, new training rules led to an explosion of these so-called CDL mills that basically sell you a license with almost no real training.
And this slide right here, it just lays out that central mistake perfectly. See, in the old reality, big companies had the tech and new drivers went to them. But in the new reality, tech-savvy freight brokers, the middlemen, they completely took over. They have zero obligation to enforce safety. They just use their automation to find and buy the absolute cheapest trucking capacity available. So instead of helping the big, safe carriers, the new rules handed the entire market to the lowest cost, least compliant operators out there.
So the system was already weakened, right? It was primed for disaster. But then, three major forces came along that just poured gasoline on the fire, turning what was a serious problem into a full-blown catastrophe.
First, those brokers got control of a third of all freight and drove rates so low that operating safely and legally became basically unprofitable. Second, a surge in immigration provided a huge pool of labor for foreign-owned fleets that could exploit workers with low pay and dangerously long hours. And third, and this is crazy, when logistics jobs got offshored and then cut, laid-off workers used their insider knowledge to organize massive cargo theft rings, all from outside the reach of U.S. law enforcement.
So, after all that, where does that leave us today? Well, the results of this broken system are pretty stark. It's a combination of economic damage, a real national security threat, and a public safety crisis on our roads.
This new reality is grim. There's no other word for it. The law-abiding drivers and carriers are just struggling to break even. Our supply chain is under constant attack from sophisticated, foreign-coordinated theft, and most tragically, our roads are just significantly more dangerous, with that rise in fatal crashes being driven almost entirely by these untrained, overworked drivers in 80,000-pound rigs.
When you step back, it's just incredible. What began as this well-intentioned campaign to solve a so-called driver shortage ended up completely breaking an entire industry. And it all happened in less than a decade, right out in plain sight, while almost no one in Washington or in corporate America seemed to notice it was even happening.
So this leaves us with a final and, I think, crucial question. We've seen how a system that is so vital to our country's economy and our safety can just completely unravel because of a series of small, seemingly logical decisions. The real question now is, what on earth will it take to put all the pieces back together?